from the people of Cuba. We are in the presence of Cuba's Foreign Affairs Minister, His Excellency Bruno Rodriguez. We align ourselves with these statements made by the delegations of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement, by Iraq on behalf of the G77 and China, by Honduras on behalf of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, and by Eritrea on behalf of the Group of Friends in Defense of the United Nations Charter. Mr. President, 1 more year has elapsed of the economic, commercial and financial embargo imposed by the United States against the sisterly Republic of Cuba. We've had 1 more year of many breaches of the overwhelming decisions made by this General Assembly. In accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter and international law, this Assembly has roundly rejected the blockade and has called tirelessly for its lifting. This blockade is a protracted and inhumane attack designed not only to suffocate the economy of a country, but also to see its people yield and fall on their knees. However, despite the cruel nature of this collective punishment and the grave consequences it's had for the people's development, the Cuban people keep resisting. They face deprivation that no nation deserves to withstand, and this in the midst of the 21st century. Consequently, Bolivia condemns in the very strongest terms this unjustifiable policy, a policy which is a mass, flagrant and systematic violation of human rights, the most basic human rights that should be enjoyed by a people. Myriad bodies and experts view this embargo as an act of economic war aimed towards a genocide because it affects all productive sectors of the country's economy, such as construction, tourism, transport, civil air engineering, the industry, etc. The extrajudicial application of laws under the Helms-Burton Act means that businesses, vessels and ships are persecuted. That is, vessels sending fuel and other essential inputs to the country. Not only does this violate Cuba's sovereignty, but also undermines the Cuban people's right to self-determination, and it hampers efforts made by its government to fight against poverty and inequality. In practical terms, what we're seeing is a threat to multilateralism and a transgression of international trade law and international laws regarding the freedom of navigation. Bolivia is committed to the principles of the UN Charter and of international law and convinced of their importance. Once again, we join the international community to condemn and repudiate in the very strongest possible terms the unilateral, immoral and criminal economic, commercial and financial embargo that has now been in place for more than half a century. It's been imposed by the United States against our sisterly Cuba. President, Excellencies, moreover, my country condemns the systematic interventionist initiatives seen by the hegemonic power. They claim the authority to draw up unilateral lists of sovereign countries. We demand that the State Department of the U.S. withdraw the Republic of Cuba from their list of state sponsors of terrorism without delay, because them being on that list has ratcheted up the blockade and stopped Cuba from integrating into international trade and stopped them from conducting financial operations. Mr. President, the adoption and implementation of unilateral coercive measures as a geopolitical weapon and instrument of economic coercion hampers the full enjoyment of all human rights. It works against independence, sovereignty, and the right of self-determination of the peoples. For 30 years, this General Assembly has been adopting resolution after resolution, demanding that the governments of the United States end unconditionally their policy of an embargo against Cuba. The disregard for these resolutions demonstrates that there are countries that have gained through this decision. They don't respect the decisions that don't suit them, but they otherwise comply with resolutions of the General Assembly. In light of the above, Mr. President, Bolivia will support and vote in favor of the draft resolution that today is put before this Assembly because we reject this immoral economic, commercial and financial embargo, but we also call for and demand that the inhumane unilateral embargo imposed by the United States be lifted immediately. The struggle of the Cuban people is also one of Latin America and the Caribbean, and it is a struggle of all the peoples of the world. Thank you. I thank the representative of the plurinational state of Bolivia. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, Mr. President, we gather today to demonstrate our determination confronting one of the most persistent and pressing challenges to international peace and security. The expansionist policies and unilateral coercive measures imposed by certain governments, the rising reliance on unilateral coercive measures coupled with an interventionist, flawed and short-sighted foreign policy is a clear indication of unrestrained unilateralism. Unilateral sanctions are a method used to achieve narrow-minded national objectives, but they have a serious adverse impact on the promotion of peace both regionally and internationally. They are fundamental impediment to establishment not only a peaceful and prosperous world, but also a just and equitable international order, which is a vital prerequisite for sustainable development. Tragically, at this critical moment in history, the world faces challenges that demand unity and multilateralism more than ever, especially in the amidst of the genocide and the brutal and increasing crimes of the Israeli apartheid regime against the people of Gaza and Lebanon. The United States and certain European countries persist in pursuing unilateral coercive measures that threaten international peace and security. These unlawful measures rooted in arrogance and unilateralism endanger multilateralism, destabilize the global order, and undermine the spirit of the Charter of the United Nations. The inhuman sanction and blockade imposed in Cuba by the United States for more than 6 decades under pretext such as promoting democracy represent the most unjust and prolonged system of unilateral measures ever applied against any country. Cuba's sanctions are in no way short of a military blockade which is prohibited under modern international law. Mr. President, we are here today to stand in solidarity with Cuba as we have done for the past 33 years. Each year, this Assembly, the most inclusive and representative body of the United Nations, has overwhelmingly called for the immediate and unconditional lifting of the embargo. The international community recognized that such unilateral measures deprive the Cuban people of their basic rights, including access to health care, education, and a dignified standard of living. This debate, however, goes beyond Cuba alone. The imposition of unilateral sanctions is a broader symptom of a policy framework that punishes independent nations that refuse to conform to the hegemonic agenda of the particular states. It is actually a method of warfare disguised as a peaceful targeting people from other independent countries. Regrettably, the United States has been addicted to imposing such methods of warfare against a state that don't submit to or follow their contradictory and expansionist policies. Mr. President, the international community must reaffirm its commitment to multilateralism and the principles of the sovereign equality and non-interference. We call on all member states to reject unilateralism by their action, not just word, and oppose any measures that undermine peace, stability, and development. The embargo against Cuba must end immediately and unconditionally. This will not only bring relief to the Cuban people, but also send a powerful message that the era of the coercion, domination, and economic terrorism must come to an end. The Islamic Republic of Iran stands in unwavering solidarity with the people and government of Cuba in their struggle against unjust measures. Together with all nations committed to justice, we will continue to advocate for the elimination of all forms of unilateral coercive measures as they threaten not just individual nations, but the entire framework of international cooperation and peaceful coexistence. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt.
We're listening to the first few statements of the second day of the debate at the UN General Assembly as countries continue to express their condemnation of the U.S. blockade. We'll be right back with other statements in a few minutes.